Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Real and Raw Experience. My name is Christine, and today we're going to be talking about boundaries. And there's the three of us on the call today, so I'll let everybody else introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Pam. Hope you guys are having a great day, and we're glad that you're here with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney, and I'm also happy to be talking about boundaries this afternoon, and I'm glad you're here to be part of the discussion.
You know, we were just having a brief discussion before we came on, and I think all of us are just so amazed at how far boundaries really can go when it comes to the way that we live our lives. And each of us have different boundaries. So a lot of the times the question is, how do we decide what is a boundary for ourselves, and how do we protect ourselves in making it clear that, hey, this is a boundary for me? So while I was reviewing and researching boundaries, I was quite surprised to find out that there's actually 5 separate types of boundaries that exist in our lives. And you know, the first one is a physical boundary. And that's when you're really dealing with privacy, personal space, sexuality in your body. Another one could be mental boundaries. And that's when you have the freedom to actually express your own thoughts in the way that you feel. Another one is emotional, which for me has always been a challenge. And that's when you have the freedom to really express your emotions. You know, I like to cry a lot. So for me as a kid, it's like, what's wrong? Why are you crying all the time?
Mm-hmm.
So for some of us, our emotions become something that we hold within because we're afraid of being criticized or critiqued for the way that we're feeling about something. And then we have material boundaries, which is obviously when you lend or give other things to people, such as your car even, or you're lending books or something where you just feel like, you know, I don't really want to do that, but I'll be nice and I'll do it anyway.
Especially money, right?
Especially money. That's a great one, Pam. You're so right. And then the last one is spiritual boundaries. And those are really our beliefs. You look in the world today, we all have different political views, ways that we see ourselves spiritually in this world. And a lot of times there's certain boundaries and places where we don't want to talk about that because we're afraid of also affecting everybody else's boundaries as well. So there's different boundaries that we have in our lives, and today we're going to be really discussing the whole gamut of them to give you some idea as to how are you living your life and what boundaries are you find being crossed. The question is, how do we know when a boundary is being crossed? So what are your thoughts, Pam and Tara, on how do you know when you're feeling like your privacy is being invaded?
When my boundaries are crossed, I feel a little uncomfortable, right? I get this feeling inside me that something just isn't right, and that it's something that I just don't want to do, or think, actually, even. My boundaries sometimes were crossed, and I found that, especially from reading all of this about boundaries, that it's not just about saying no to something. It's much more than that. So if you're feeling a little taken aback, I would really step back and think about it. And it's okay to set something that you're not feeling comfortable with.
Pam, I feel the same exact way. I feel like I know that boundaries have been crossed when I'm in conflict. Like, I feel that, just what you described, I don't want to do something, but I'm afraid to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is, will I disappoint someone? Will someone be upset with me? Often, and Christine, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Maybe I've committed to something. I've said I was going to do something, and then something happened. And I'm so much about following through on my word and not and saying I did this, and I have to stay the course. I have to follow through. But then realizing that doing that either puts, it will either exhaust me, make me, put too much on my plate. And, really conflict is the biggest word that keeps coming. Like, I'm
Yes.
not in alignment with with what I want to be doing. And I can tell you a little bit of on a tangent, like I have less tolerance for that now. I will not tolerate being out of alignment. Yeah. So.
Right. And that takes time to get to that point, right?
Right.
It's experience, and learning it at a younger age is really a great tool to have. But if, as we get older, as we take our experiences and we learn, it's okay, because we remember, okay, we set a boundary around that particular thing and everything went okay. And if it didn't go okay, we figured out what happened and we moved forward. So releasing the fear and the guilt around setting that boundary is probably another whole conversation, right? Releasing all of that. So absolutely. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it also has to do with the person who you're setting the boundaries with. You know, the question is, do you feel safe even setting that boundary with them? And that's the hardest part, I know, for a lot of men and women I deal with in marriages, is that those boundaries feel so blurry at times. And you're not really quite sure how to set them in a way that's respectful. And even as mothers,
right?
You know, I'll give you a very simple example of a boundary that I set with my 20-year-old daughter, because for me, I mentioned this before, respect is very important. I consider that one of my values. And we were having a discussion. It wasn't a screaming match or anything, but it was definitely a heated discussion. And she hung up on me. And that didn't go well. And so instead of me brewing and being angry, I said, you know what? I called her back and I said, I find that was very disrespectful. And the beauty of when you're discussing boundaries with people, sometimes there's two sides of the story. So when I talked to her, I found out, she's like, Mom, the reason that I hung up the phone is because I was afraid I was going to say something that was going to hurt you and that I couldn't take back. And I said, you know what, sweetheart, that's fine. But next time, say those words.
Exactly.
And I'm fine with that. But if you're going to hang up on me, then just say, you know what, Mom, I'm going to say something that, you know, I don't want to continue the conversation and I'd like to end it. That I can respect.
And she set her own boundary, right? Yes. By doing that.
Yes, exactly. And that's the funny thing with boundaries too, is I think, you know, we have to be aware of our own boundaries, but also be respectful that other people have a boundary as well.
I think what you're bringing up, Christine, is so important, because it's almost like having a boundary means that you've inserted what's important to you in the dynamic of the relationship or the dynamic of the situation. Like what, in that great example you just shared, like you asked something, you were clear around what was important to you and what you wanted, and then you were able to put that in place.
Yes.
And I think what's critical about that is that when I've had trouble, one of my past hangups setting boundaries has been that if I've done it so badly. Like, you've done something wrong. Like, I'll point fingers, right? Like, how dare you hang up on me? Or you've done something wrong. Look what you're doing to me. And it's a very much a victim mindset. But really, if I got clear around what I wanted, and to be able to put that in the mix and say, you know, what I really want here is respect, or I really want, you know, whatever the components are, then putting that into the mix, I think, makes communication around those boundaries so much easier to hear for the person that you're speaking with. And it's sort of like, it sort of puts us both in a neutral environment. Like, I'm not going to blame you. I'm just going to own what's important to me.
Owning it.
Yeah, I'm just going to own what's important to me. Like think about, you had a great example, Pam, at one point about maybe being asked to go to a party on I don't even know what it was, like a Friday night or a Saturday night. And maybe you just didn't want to go. or maybe this just stuck in my head by something that you were sharing at one point. And I thought, wow, if you just sort of say a boundary could be, I need to take care of myself. What's really important to me is self-care and rest and feeling like I put my health first.
Right.
Then you can put that into the mix of setting a boundary around going or not going to a party, and not making any, and doing it with ease without it being like making someone wrong for demanding so much of us.
Right. And it make you feel, and because you're just as important as that other person, right? So if it's not going to fulfill you, it's okay to say no around it. You know, growing a story of mine growing up, if we were invited to 3 parties in one day, we went to all 3 parties in one day. There was no boundaries, right? And because you were invited and it was the right thing to do. But when you think about it now, thinking back on that, is that you're not giving 100% to yourself or anybody else because you're so busy rushing in and rushing out and not setting the boundaries,
Right.
saying, you know what? I was already invited to this party. Thank you so much. And enjoying the experience and being present at that particular time.
Right.
So yeah, it goes on so many different levels, different levels.
I think you just brought up like an extraordinary reason why setting boundaries is so important, is because when you don't set them, you're not able to give 100% of what you have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it can go like, and Christine, you probably can experience this too. Like when we're compromised, we're not able to offer 100% of ourselves.
That's right.
To the person, to the party, to a job, to whatever we're being asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think the anger, the resentment, all of that stuff begins to erode and eat away at you. And sometimes Pam and I were discussing about this before, is that you become so tired that you just become, you have these flip-flop boundaries. And I think so much of setting boundaries is really first understanding who we are and what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Because many times we see other people setting boundaries and think, oh, maybe I should have a boundary on certain things. And it's really about first your work and understanding who you are and becoming confident and clear and saying, this is me, I'm okay, and this is what I want, and these are my needs, these are my thoughts. I used to get criticized for having, rainbow in the sky, what is that called? Castle in the sky thinking, and all of those things. And then eventually you start believing it. The more that people cross those boundaries and enter into your space,
right,
you start questioning your own self.
Absolutely. And that's a great place with the mental boundaries. If you're around people that you allow them to manipulate your thoughts, right?
Yes.
And control your thoughts, then you enter into maybe a healthier relationship and you still have that mindset and that healthy relationship. Now you have to reset your boundaries because they're willing to open up and listen to who you really are. Right? So now you have that boundary, and it's really not an easy transition to go from that not having mental boundaries to all of a sudden being able to express yourself, right? It's not an easy transition, but it is doable. It's not impossible to do that. So you just have to be patient. And if you're with the right people and with yourself in the right way, it totally does all come together. It really, really does. And it's a beautiful thing when all of a sudden you realize that you're not that person, that other person, you allow that other person to make you think you were that way. Yeah. Right? So it's not that other person's fault either. It's basically, you don't want to point fingers, but you didn't set the story. You didn't set your boundaries to tell them, no, I'm not going to deal with that anymore. So yeah, it takes a lot of work, but it's definitely possible to get there.
And I think practice. I think, the beauty of it is when once you become aware of this, you can practice with people who you feel safe with.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, that's the most important part of all this, I think, is really sorry for my cat, is really, he doesn't have any boundaries, is practicing. And, you know, we're here for you. That's the reason why we're having these conversations.
Absolutely.
So post some things on the Facebook and the group, you know, and tell us what your boundaries are and how do you deal with them? Because we'd love to hear from you as well. And if you're feeling stuck, you know, post it and we'll definitely respond, because at the end of the day, I think boundaries are really the only way that we can feel secure and safe. And when we're threatened with our own security and safety, it's really hard to move to our other needs.
Absolutely.
In our relationship or in our life.
It definitely is foundation for success in whatever level, you know, whatever your definition of success is, it's definitely a foundation piece to work on for that success.
So if we were to come up with a, say, 3 to 5 step process around setting boundaries, like kind of a summary of our conversation here, I think what I hear is, one, it's critical that we set them to really show up at 100%. The first, and then I'm also hearing that we have to, one, be aware that a boundary has been crossed.
That's right.
Yes.
And then the second step is, so just really like kind of, and that being aware is that conflict that we talked about. So being aware of tuning into the conflict and saying, hold on, a boundary's been crossed. And then next it would be, what do we want from this situation? Like what is it in this situation that's missing that we would like to request something of? So that could be more, you know, not being willing to offer our time, or not being willing to offer our money, or not being willing, whatever it is that's being crossed. So inserting our own value into the conversation in a way that makes it about us, not necessarily about the ask, right? And then I hear practicing it with people that we feel like we can express ourselves with and feel safe around. So it could be people that we really trust initially, because we know that the more we practice setting boundaries, the better we'll get at them.
That's right.
Absolutely. Very well said, Tara.
That's wonderful. And you could ask, you could let those comfortable people know what you're working on if you want to, if you're that comfortable with it, right? So they could be part of that process with you. That's a great summary. That's really a wonderful summary.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm going to go practice setting boundaries all over the place. I'm going to go set some more.
Isn't that fun when we can get excited about this? I mean, this is, you know, people used to say, you need to set your boundaries, and then it would be such a scary thought, like, oh my gosh. But what if we realize and recognize that setting boundaries is a way for us to stay healthy, is a way for us to grow. It's a way for us to really engage more with the life that we want to live.
I think that's so beautiful, because we're doing it on our terms and what works for us. And when we do that, we do offer more. So people get more from us when we're able to do it in a way that works for us, as opposed to the way we think they're demanding of us.
Right. And then people are going to see us as a reflection and want to do the same thing.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing when that happens.
Yes.
So, beautiful.
Great conversation.
Last words. Go ahead, Tara. Last words.
No, I'm jazzed about this conversation. It's been really great. Thank you both. This has been
thank you. It's wonderful.
All right, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Wednesday, and we'll be seeing you next Wednesday on our Facebook Live.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.